Okay, in this video, we're going to continue talking about constituents, building on what we did in the last video in which we talked about noun phrase constituents. So in the last video, we looked at the concept of constituent, and we showed that multiple words can act as a single unit within a sentence. And we did it by focusing on a particular constituent, the noun phrase. And we used two kinds of tests. We used a substitution test and we used a question test. So the goal in this little presentation is to use the same approach, the same logic, but to do so in order to show two more kinds of constituents, in particular prepositional phrases and verb phrases. So let's start with the sentence, the students spent the night at the party. If you've ever studied English grammar, you probably know that the string of words at the party is generally referred to in English as a prepositional phrase that consists of a preposition at and the object of the preposition, the party. So if we have the students spent the night at the party, where our prepositional phrase is in red, what we're interested in here is whether we can use the kinds of tests that we've done, questions and substitution, to actually establish this idea that at the party, three words is acting as a single unit, as a single phrase. Let's start with our substitution test. We can see right away that we can't substitute a pronoun. So we can't say, for example, the students spent the night at the them, right? That would be completely ungrammatical. So we can't take a pronoun like them. The students spent the night them, right? We can't do that. The students spent the night them doesn't work. And that's not really all that surprising, because if we remember that pronouns take the place of whole noun phrases, there's no reason that we should expect that our pronoun test will work if we're trying to test something that's not a noun phrase. So that's not really a big problem. What we need to do is think of what could take the place of at the party. So let's think again. At the party is a string of words that gives us information about location. So with that in mind, let's think of the following. The students spent the night there. What we see in an example like this is that for the string at the party, we can substitute the single form there. Note then that it replaces all three words at the party, not just the party without the at. We can't say the students spent the night at there. So really, this is just like what we saw with the pronouns. Pronouns replace whole noun phrases, not single nouns. And this is why, if we remember, the following was no good in English. They treated the patients. For that example sentence we used, the doctors treated the patients. In sentences such as, the students spent the night at the party, there is functioning in what we can call a pro form, since it's not technically a pronoun, it's just a form that's a pro form, a substitutable form, that replaces prepositional phrases that express location in this case. Okay, more simply then, the students spent the night there, right, using there, shows us that at the party is a string of three words that nevertheless acts as a single constituent unit, what we call a prepositional phrase. And it also shows us that there is a proform that we can use to test for other location-based prepositional phrases. So the next question is whether we can also use the question test to identify prepositional phrases. So consider the following. Where did the students spend the night? What have we done here? By asking this question, what we get is the answer at the party. So we can use our question test to identify prepositional phrases too. We just have to ask the right questions, like where did they spend the night? Summarizing, we've used the sentence, the students spent the night at the party, to show us that at the party is a string of three words that act as a single unit, that is, that act as a constituent called a prepositional phrase within the sentence. And we've done this by using the same kinds of tests that we used for noun phrases. We use the proform there as a substitution test word for at the party. And we use the question word where to get an answer that comprised the whole string at the party, because we asked the question, where did the students spend the night? Now let's think about one more constituent type and see if we can use the same kind of logic to look at other strings of words that act as single units. And the constituent we're interested in here is called the verb phrase. Our example sentence this time is very, very simple, actually. We're going to look at the sentence, the professors ate the hot dogs. First, let's review what we already know. From our pronoun substitution test and our question test, how many noun phrases do we know that there are in this sentence? Think about it. The professors ate the hot dogs. How many noun phrases are we going to find in this sentence? Well, I'm going to put it in red. We have the professors and we have the hot dogs. And if we think about how we did our tests, they ate the hot dogs shows us that the professors is a noun phrase. The professors ate them by substitution shows us that the hot dogs is a noun phrase. Who ate the hot dogs gives us the professors, and what did the professors eat gives us the other noun phrase, the hot dogs. Okay, so the sentence has two noun phrases. But what about the larger string of words, ate the hot dogs? Is that also a constituent? And if so, can we show that that's a constituent, right? Because here we have four words that are acting potentially as a single unit. So the answer is yes, we can show that it's a constituent, but it's a little bit trickier. So we have to figure out what the appropriate way to use tests is to show that these four words act as a unit. Okay, so we're going to start this time with the question test and think about the answer to the following question. What did the professors do? If we ask this question, what did the professors do? The answer we get is ate the hot dogs. Note that by asking what did they do and not what did they eat, we're not asking for what thing they ate, what noun phrase they ate, but rather what the activity was that they took part in. So the answer includes ate and everything that follows it, in this case, the hot dogs. A more precise and specific and correct way of characterizing what this string of words is to say that the string ate the hot dogs is a verb phrase. In the sentence, the professors ate the hot dogs. Okay, and we can ask it by saying, what did the professors do? Once we understand how we can ask a question that allows us to identify the entire verb phrase, we're in a position to understand how we can also use a kind of substitution test to do the same thing, right? So we're going to try a kind of substitution test to show us that ate the hot dogs is a verb phrase that confirms what we saw with our question testing. So consider the following example. The professors ate the hot dogs and the students did so too. What have I done here? Let's make some observations. Well, I added a sentence with a conjunction and I changed the subject of that conjoined sentence to the students, so it's different from the professors. But the important part is what I did in 3. I took the whole string, ate the hot dogs, and I replaced it with did so too. What does this conjoined sentence mean? Well, it's important to think about what it means. What it means is that the students also ate the hot dogs. And it absolutely can't mean anything else. That is, it can't mean that by saying did so too, I've substituted the whole verb phrase hot dogs to mean something other than eating hot dogs, right? So I can't say, and the students did so too the hamburgers. Putting it together, while sentences are made up of linearly ordered words, we need to recognize that those words are organized into constituents. And in this and the preceding pencast, we've been introduced to 3 different kinds of constituents: noun phrases, prepositional phrases, and verb phrases. We've also used what we call constituent tests, and in particular, we've used two kinds of tests to identify the constituents that we've looked at. Okay, and these two kinds of tests are broadly known as substitution tests and question tests. And before we finish, there's one more important observation that we need to make. So let's go back to our simple example. The professors ate the hot dogs. What we've established throughout the last couple of pencasts is that we know that this sentence contains two noun phrases, the professors and the hot dogs. And we also know that it contains a verb phrase, ate the hot dogs. Well, that shows us actually something even more interesting. That brings us all the way back to the first pencast when I said that syntax requires us to understand issues both of linear order and hierarchical structure. The linear order of words is easy to see, but the hierarchical structure is less obvious. But once we understand that sentences are actually made up of constituent phrases, the concept of hierarchy becomes easier and actually necessary to understand. So back to our example sentence. If we think about it, our linear order, the professors ate the hot dogs, is actually a structured phrase that contains the professors ate the hot dogs, where the hot dogs is inside of ate the hot dogs. And this is bracketed kind of to show you what I mean. So even with a simple sentence like this, we see that a string of 6 words actually contains 3 constituents. And if we think about our verb phrase, we see that one of these noun phrase constituents is actually nested inside of that verb phrase. Big picture, big picture, big picture. In all human languages, if we want to understand what is going on in syntax, we need to understand this concept of constituents being nested within other constituents. All right? This is the hierarchical structure we're talking about with respect to sentences. To at least give us a start, if it helps at all, think of the idea of those famous nested Russian dolls, where you have smaller units progressively nested inside of a larger unit, all the way down to the bottom. This is kind of the starting point that we're going to use to understand how to draw trees, how to represent the hierarchical constituent structure that we have in sentences. And we're going to use English as an example.